Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and I think we can all agree 2020 has been a pretty crap year. But the folks at Pixologic, wow, they took it one step further and they basically just skipped 2020. What they just released was ZBrush 2021.5. The final release of 2020 is, yes, ZBrush 2021.5. I gotta say, before I get into this, I hate when cars do it. I hate it even more when software does it. Stop doing this. You're not tricking anyone to thinking that your technology is newer or better because it's from the future. You're just adding confusion. Please don't future date your versions. It's really irritating. But anyways, we're going to jump in and take a look at what is new in ZBrush 2021.5 today. And the cool thing is they have very good release notes. So we're going to be able to jump in and take a look at all of that. Now, if you're not sure of what ZBrush is all about, I've covered it on the channel in the past. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this one, but it is probably the AAA sculpting solution. So if you're working in games or if you are working in film and you're creating high density 3D models, chances are it is ZBrush that you are using in your pipeline. And a lot of times you're even using it to create high density models that you'll then retopology into lower polygon versions. So basically every kind of studio has some kind of a sculpting solution in it at this point in time. So 2021.5 was just released as a free upgrade for all ZBrush users. Read on to learn more about this particular release, which is exactly what we're going to do. The first really cool new feature is this one. It is called Thick Skin, and basically it gives the surface the appearance of having thick skin. The mesh appears to have been sculpted as a fine art piece. Thick skin can also be used to establish a specific plateau from which to build upon a surface to create scales and other features with consistent height or depth. So if you're looking for like a, a not smooth, more of a chunky, thicker, more resistant surface, you can use the new thick skin clay and get exactly that effect. It's actually kind of cool, actually. If you want to learn more about it, there's a series of tutorials actually showing how to use thick skin in action. It's obviously only going to be for certain applications, but it is another tool in your tool brush. The next one we've got here is Sculptris Pro. Now, Sculptris Pro has a really confusing name if you've been following Pixologic at all, because Sculptris was a ZBrush open homage or clone kind of thing made by a single guy that ultimately Pixologic hired, and then they started giving away ZBrush free as part of Sculptris free, as part of their suite. And now they're using the Sculptris name for their dynamic tessellation technology. So that is what we are dealing with here. What you see is two surfaces dynamically sculpted with a different topology. I'm curious to hear from you though. Do you like left side or right side better? Because I actually prefer the lower polygon count because you're not losing these details. I like these details in here where we've kind of lost them over here and so on. I actually like this one better, and this is the low polygon version. Yes, this, by the way, falls under the category of low polygon in the world of ZBrush, whereas this is, as you can see, very, very high polygon. So that is what Sculptris is all about. Sculptris Pro basically makes it so you don't have to worry about that. You can start with whatever polygon count you want, but then as you start sculpting in more detail, the Sculptris Pro will basically add it. It also says it will dynamically reduce polygons wherever needed. I don't know how much I'd like the idea of my tool taking away polygons in real time, but see how well it does there. ZBrush also places a library of over 400 sculpting brushes at your fingertips. Activating Sculptris Pro will transform each of these brushes into a system for empowering creativity without limitations. Now, I do have to say, ZBrush is incredibly powerful, but it's also got one of the worst user interfaces out there. It's starting to suffer from feature bloat and UI bloat, and hopefully one of these updates eventually gets into making it cleaner to use. But anyways, new features, always nice. Just organize them a bit better. So next up we have this is almost what you could think of as like a filter, like when you're using a 2D painting application, you want to globally or locally change the contrast. Well, you can now do the same thing basically in 3D. So you can see the effect here. More contrast, less contrast. But the thing is, you're not just basically applying a lighting shader here. You're changing the depth of the sculpted model here. And what you can see here is did not sculpt those wrinkles deeply enough. Need to enhance the details of those fish scales for a 3D print. Contrast slider provides you the ability to globally enhance all sculpting details, while the contrast brushes make it possible to focus on specific areas to heighten your sculptural details. Specific depths can be applied on an individual basis and even adjusted in real time, giving true freedom to experiment. Contrast doesn't just bump the details. It can also be applied to smooth a surface back towards the original state before sculpting's details were applied. So that's actually kind of cool. You can do it locally or you can do it on a global level, and I can actually see this being pretty useful, to be honest. But the coolest thing, in my humble opinion, is this one. We'll call this Z-Rope. It's not called Z-Rope, it's called Curve Helpers, but I like it. So what you can do basically is sculpt stuff. So here they're sculpting these areas like that with these tubes, and then you can convert them into other stuff, like in this case, rope. So if you're doing things like shoelaces or strings of light or rope or, some things that actually can be kind of tedious and tricky to model, well, that's what this takes care of. So you see here, need to tie a knot around the character's waist, create a flow of wires through a mech, or apply laces to a shoe or boot. Curve Helpers is your answer. Simply draw any shape with ZSpheres, as you can see here, and it adjusts to fit your need. Then with a simple click, convert ZSpheres into an editable curve that will allow you any surface to be applied along the curve. Continue your edits in curve mode, including swapping out the geometry being applied along the curve. So you can see here, they've swapped out this for that, and I can see this being really powerful, to be honest. That's a cool new feature. Also, I like the Christmas tie-in. Good jobs there. And then we have preview it. This one is going to mostly be shown down here. What we've got is basically real-time ambient occlusion. So you've got sculpt with real-time render accuracy that captures every stroke applied to your mesh. Real-time ambient occlusion gives you the ability to quickly see the portions of your model that might need the extra touch. Bring your creations to life in real time with preview, AO, or ambient occlusion feature. So yeah, you basically can see ambient occlusion as you're sculpting, so you can see better how the light is going to interact with the item you are currently sculpting. That's pretty cool. And then, in my opinion, if you're a real-time game modeler and you want to have things like creasing and so on, this one might actually be the most interesting. You kind of see it in action here with this low polygon knife going on. It says, do not let the walls of your topology restrict your creative process. Slice your topology along an edge, face, or point to control the direction in which you want to take the construction of polygons. Once you've got everything in place, apply a crease to multiple edges with 2 clicks to maintain that crisp edge needed for your next hard surface model. Use the fill polygroup option to mark the faces where you will add an extra layer of topology, as you can see in action down here, to create a suit of armor or the right touch of detail on a utility knife. So that's definitely going to be some nice new features for people doing hard surface modeling for sure. Here you can see crease path in action. Sorry, I didn't think of anything to say while doing this, so we'll just let it do its thing. So basically, nice new tools here for the hard surface modeler people out here. If you're making things like mecha, you're going to like that one. And then finally, we have the ability to lock rotation. So if you want to mimic the working at a sculpting table, you can basically do so. You rotate your models around a certain axis at a certain snapping degree. So you lock model rotation axis to give you that real-world feeling of working on a sculptural stand, just like the Clay Masters did. Use the rotation axis option to specify a degree of rotation for your model during a presentation meeting, or limit your viewing area of interest to just one portion of the model. Little niche, but basically it's in orbit mode. And then we've got support here for the 3D Connection Space Mouse line, which looks insane. And then we've got 2 new render presets have been added. A new radial overlay filter lets you focus your render on a specific part of the scene. Various plugins have been updated. 4 new demo projects have been added to the as base for many sculpts, and several brushes have been added to take advantage of the new thick skin feature. So on the whole, pretty solid release, especially considering, again, this one is free. And when you go take a look at, say, I don't know, Autodesk, and you look generally at their newest versions, it's a fraction of this many new features. So some definitely nice new stuff here, and especially for the world of game development. I'm not sure thick clay would be that useful too often. Sculptris Pro definitely has the potential there. Thickening across an entire thing or across certain areas. These new dynamic, what's the actual curve helpers for this. This is definitely for level designers and for, again, like things like doing piping hydraulics through a mecha or creating rope, etc. That one's going to be a huge one. Ambient occlusion in your workflow is definitely going to be nice. And then, of course, these new slicing, creasing, and filling tools are definitely nice for hard surface modelers. So that is ZBrush 2021. 0.5. Again, Pixologic, please come back to reality. 2021 is going to be a better year. Let's just do it again. So now you can release 2021.5B next year, and you can, join the rest of us in the right and proper year. So on top of that, if you're interested in grabbing a hold of ZBrush, it's not cheap. It's not that expensive. It's sort of kind of somewhere in the middle. It's pricey for sure. But you're looking at $40 a month or $190 for 6 months. Or, and this one is nice, people that want to actually own their software, you can. $895. So one time, never expires. Yeah. So I don't know how many versions you get out of that. So maybe that'll only cover you up to, I don't know, what are they up to? ZBrush 2077 next year, maybe. So there are breakdowns and details of how the licensing is going. By the way, if this is too rich for your blood, and chances are if you're not using all of ZBrush itself, there is another version out there that did not get the 2021.5 update as of yet, but there's also ZBrushCore. Now, ZBrush is basically ZBrushCore, is a subset of ZBrush. Basically, it's slightly stripped down, a lot of the same features and functionality, and for a lot of people, it is going to be sufficiently capable. If you're wondering, okay, what does it cost? Well, you're looking at $10 a month or $180 a year. So basically, that is literally half price. And oh no, that's one time. Sorry, that is literally a quarter of the price, and that is literally a quarter of the price. So ZBrushCore is definitely cheaper, and there is a migration path to move up to full ZBrush if you want. It's not much of one, but there is definitely, you can get some of your purchase back to go up to the next tier. So if you want to use this and you find that it's limiting, you can move from ZBrushCore up to full ZBrush, and you're going to get some pricing detail difference. And if you are curious, what is the difference between ZBrushCore? Well, they got you covered there. And for the most part, it's the same feature set. Same sculpting set. You are limited to 20 million polygons per mesh. If you're working in games and you're pushing your budget past 20 million polygons, you're probably doing something wrong. A limit of 36 brushes. I don't know how hard that one will be. Live booleans are not available. Z-remesher, the automatic retopology, is limited to basic as opposed to advanced. Same with dynamic subdivision and micro poly. I don't know how Oh no, ZBrushCore isn't real time like Sculptris Pro. Never mind. So that is kind of the difference between them. It'll also be interesting to see if Sculptris Pro ends up in ZBrushCore. I'm guessing by the Pro nomenclature, it's not going to. It does not have texture painting support or projection painting, so that is definitely a difference there. Limited rendering, not often used. And then export. This is another area of some concern. ZBrushCore can export OBJ file or wavefront object file, which is kind of universal static, but for the industry, that one is quite often what you want, or that one, Collada or Filmbox. Those are the two major formats that the world uses. But then again, if you're just doing static meshes, OBJ will be absolutely fine, especially because it looks like you're not going to be really doing your your texturing work inside of ZBrush Core. So some of that functionality isn't really going to be missing all that much. And by the way, if you want to get in here and try it even cheaper version, you can get the ZBrushMini Core, which is free. And it is free for use. Just do be aware. And a nice thing is, they've made this a little bit more obvious. This used to, when I first covered ZBrushCore, this was completely hidden away and it seemed a little scummy. They've made it more obvious now. This is for non-commercial use only. But if you want to get in, check out ZBrush, do some simple sculpting or just play around, kind of figure out how things work. ZBrushCore could be a good place for you to start. It is basically the freest of free versions. So you've got Mini Core, you can check it out, see what sculpting is all about. And then from there, you can go to ZBrushCore. And if you find you need more, or you want to do texturing or such inside of it, then you're going to go to ZBrush Full. And the nice thing, once again, is they do have perpetual licensing, and I know that's a big deal. So that is ZBrush 2021.5. An interesting thing. Now, they've actually got some competition going on here with Blender sculpting improving at a staggering rate. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens between those two. Pablo's work on sculpting on Blender has been just breathtaking. So it'll be interesting to see if perhaps ZBrushCore gets a little bit more features and functionality to compete with free, or if ZBrush just stays the industry standard. They have added enough for this version that I got faith in them holding their crown, at least for the immediate future. But let me know what you think of ZBrush in general, the 3 different tiers of perpetual licensing, all of that. Comments down below, and I will talk to you all later.